At the beginning of the month, Adobe updated the terms of service for all of their apps, saying that sometimes humans at Adobe would look at your private pictures. On June 7th, I made a video that criticized that, saying we don't want you looking at our pictures for any reason. And to their credit, on June 10th, Adobe responded and said, okay, give us a week. We're going to change our terms of service. Yesterday, they did that. They updated their terms of service. They did make a lot of things clear. I have more insight into exactly which pictures they look at and which they don't, which actually remain private, and I'll share that with you. But it's not all good news. First, I do want to cover something related, which is the FTC in the United States, part of the US government, the Federal Trade Commission, which is responsible for how businesses conduct business. Do they treat consumers fairly, for example? They are suing Adobe. They actually started this process in 2022 when they let Adobe know that they were concerned about how they handled customer cancellations to their subscriptions, because this is my own personal testimony. I had 3 Adobe accounts. I needed to cancel one, and it was a nightmare. Adobe makes it very difficult for you to cancel, but they make it very easy to subscribe. And to me, I think the subscription and cancellation process should be exactly as easy, but we all know that's not true of many corporations, including Adobe. They want to make it hard to get out so that you keep paying monthly fees for software you're not even using. Now, the US government is suing Adobe, and Adobe says they're going to fight it in court because they do have a team of lawyers, one of which you will see in just a few minutes. And in related news, Adobe released their quarterly financial report where they talk about how much money they've made. And guess what? Record revenues. They made over $5 billion in revenue in a quarter. That's 3 months out of the year, with over $1 billion of that in profit, right about 30% profit. I don't mind companies making money. I want them to make money. And maybe this is good news because Adobe has plenty of extra money, partially from making us extend our subscriptions longer than we really wanted to. They can spend a few bucks on software development and address our problems. I'm going to cover how I think they should address the privacy concerns that we have, because they are well thought out and very legitimate. So let's talk about what Adobe has been doing and how they're addressing it now. Right now and going forward, any file that gets sent to Adobe's cloud will be screened by an automated process, probably artificial intelligence, to see if it might be what they call child sexual abuse material.
We know sometimes legal language only makes sense to lawyers. So I want to take a few minutes now to walk you through what has changed in this new update. If you choose to upload content to our servers, it may be automatically scanned for illegal or abusive content, such as child sexual abuse material.
If that system flags it, then a human looks at it to sort of validate that. We're all against CSAM, and I don't think anybody who makes that deserves any amount of privacy, but there's a huge problem with that, and it's false positives. I'm going to open up Photoshop and open a picture. This picture is located on my local computer. You might even recognize the picture from the cover of the book on Photoshop that I wrote. Now I'm going to use generative fill and just draw a box with no text description and watch what happens. Adobe kicks it out. Adobe rejects the image and sends me to their content guidelines, which tell me that I can't make illegal stuff like child sexual abuse material. But that's not what this is. This is a perfectly innocent cover. And this is the fundamental problem with their plan of automated screening, is that there are a lot of false positives. Any picture could potentially be kicked out to a human. And we can't all have humans reviewing any random picture. Now, this is not a private picture, but I think a boudoir photo of a full-grown adult is probably even more likely to be kicked out. And if you are a boudoir photographer, do you want to have a discussion with your client where you're like, this is a very private process. This is going to be between me, you, your husband, and maybe some guy at Adobe. Maybe some guy at Adobe will look at it, but it's just the 4 of us. Unless that guy at Adobe pulls out a smartphone, takes a picture and shares it with his friends, and then maybe it goes on. But otherwise, it's just between us and the guy at Adobe and anybody that they tend to share it with. This is not me being extremist. This happens over and over and over again. And keep in mind, I have a background in IT. I manage large networks. And while I respected people's privacy, I saw people around me dig into people's private files. When somebody manages your files and they have access to it, that will get exploited. Here is a relevant news article where people at Tesla spied on customers' cameras in their cars because the terms of service at Tesla allowed people to review the footage from the cars. Now that seems innocent enough, except that the employees reviewing the footage would actually share it with other people. They would joke about stuff. They would watch people doing their laundry. Here's the scary part. This is legal. It is legal for Adobe to do the same types of things because they have it covered in their terms of service. So that's the crux of the privacy problem here. Adobe, maybe their heart's in the right place and that they want to filter out CSAM, but their filter is overly aggressive, not particularly accurate. Maybe they just want to make sure they don't miss a single image, so anything that looks like a naked kid, this is not. But that all gets kicked out. But that's definitely going to mean boudoir photos. It could be a woman holding a camera that's embargoed and not yet released. Or it could be pictures of your kid in the bath or playing at the beach or something. Their terms of service and their algorithm are set up in such a way that so many different types of legal but private images can be shared to a human. But Adobe did provide some clarity around which exact images might be shared. And they're saying it's only going to be files that are in the cloud, not your local files. But that's not quite as clear as you might think, because the image I was just editing was stored on my local computer. But when I pulled up generative AI, now the image needs to get sent to the cloud. And Adobe really hasn't provided much transparency over whether that means it might be kicked to a human review or not, but we can see it failed their screening process, so I'm inclined to think that it probably was then reviewed by a human. So let's talk about what is local and what gets sent to the cloud and thus might be reviewed by a human. Anything you do in standard Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic, is probably sent to the cloud, though you do have the option to store stuff locally. The default is using the cloud. Thus, all your pictures might potentially be reviewed by a human if it fails the AI screening test, which lots of pictures do. With Lightroom Classic, most stuff is local. Things like selecting the sky, selecting a subject seem to happen locally because they continue to function when I have the Wi-Fi off, and thus I'm inclined to think that it doesn't trigger the AI filters. But using the new generative fill healing brush, which is a really useful way to remove a stray person or power line or dust, that does send stuff to the cloud, and thus I'm inclined to think it could be reviewed by a human. Now, in Photoshop, even when working with a local file, if you do select subject, it will get sent to the cloud, unlike Lightroom Classic. And of course, if you use generative spot removal or AI image generation, that goes to the cloud. Now, why is Adobe doing this? Why have they slapped a badge on themselves and declared that they need to police your materials, not for all crimes, but for just child sexual abuse material? Because it's not their job, because we have the Justice Department who does that. And in fact, the Justice Department doesn't have nearly the privileges that Adobe does because of the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says the police can't just go rummaging through private stuff because people deserve privacy. But also the Founding Fathers had the experience that if you gave police too much power, they would abuse it because humans abuse power. And that's what we're asking for here. We're asking for you to rein in the power of your employees who will absolutely abuse it. Here's what one of you, a viewer, said. After 37 years in law enforcement and many years on sensitive criminal investigations, I can tell you this: Adobe has granted itself far more unilateral access to people's information than the police at all levels are given. At least in my former line of work, we were required to have the state issue a subpoena or convince a judge to issue a warrant based on cause. There's a big difference between a judge issuing a warrant and Adobe's AI algorithm deciding a human should look at something. So why is Adobe doing this? Because they don't have to. There's no law in the United States that says services need to proactively search for this type of thing. Again, because that is the job of the judicial branch. I think they're doing it because they want to protect the reputation of their precious AI, because they know people are going to abuse their AI for things that it shouldn't do. Because people are already doing that. Like, there are open models for AI like Stable Diffusion, and people have already been arrested for doing things like what Adobe is afraid of. Creeps have been able to use Photoshop for decades, and Adobe hasn't fought back. They could have put little AI models in the app that would reject things that might be creepy. They haven't done it. They've implemented it in the cloud, I think, to specifically protect their AI model. Adobe had to pick between potentially bad PR and all of our privacy, and they chose to protect themselves against bad PR. And in particular, my experience with their filter shows that it's extremely aggressive. Like, they have tuned it to not let anything through. They'd rather catch 100 totally innocent pictures than let one not innocent picture go through. But that means a lot of people manually looking at private pictures. This can be fixed, especially because Adobe has lots of money to fix this. So here's how you do it. First, mind your own business and stop with the manual review thing. You don't need to do it. Stop it. Second, give us the option to encrypt our data in your cloud. If somebody is using Lightroom and storing files in the cloud, they're paying you for that service. Their files should be private. Apple does this. Apple's iCloud gives you the option for end-to-end encryption, where the keys to decrypt files are stored on your phone, on your Mac, whatever, and Apple themselves cannot decrypt it. You could give us that option and stay the hell out of our files. Next, clearly tell us when something is being sent to the cloud where a human being might review it, so that we can pick the files that we don't want some dude at Adobe looking at. And give me a private mode where stuff is guaranteed to stay private, and features like generative AI that could very easily be accidentally used on a private image. Those features will be disabled if there's no way for you to move those things to my local computer, which would be better. Next, if somebody at Adobe looks at my private picture, tell me, absolutely tell me. If they looked at this picture, send me a message that says a human being reviewed your image because we thought it might be creepy. And I know you're not going to do that, because I would then post this on social media and be like, why is Adobe looking at my private pictures when it's clearly not creepy? And well, you're not going to tell me when you do that because you want some privacy, right? Because you don't want to be scrutinized, because you don't want us saying Adobe's filter is too aggressive. But that's what transparency is. Transparency is saying, I had to go through your stuff. I'm sorry, it was a mistake. And if you are afraid of people calling you out for going through their personal photos, then maybe you'll invest some more of that money into fine-tuning it a little bit, or doing other things to protect our privacy. But we demand transparency. Beyond telling each individual when someone reviews their photos, I want to see an aggregate report. Every quarter, tell us how many photos human beings looked at, and how many of those were completely innocent photos where you just invaded somebody's privacy because of your poorly functioning AI algorithm. So that's Adobe's update. And needless to say, I'm disappointed, because a week ago they made it sound like they heard us. They recognized that they made a mistake, but then they didn't change the key stuff. What I missed the first time around is that Adobe is not using your pictures to build generative AI models.
We don't train generative AI models on your content.
But they may be using it to build other types of AI models. So generative AI is like, you type in the words, a tree with mountains in the background, and it draws that picture based on images that have been basically stolen from stock photographers like myself. Other types of AI include the AI that they use to select the sky or select the subject. They may very well use your pictures to do those things. I'm okay with that, but it is a little weird, and I wish they were a little more clear about it. I don't think Adobe should be training their AI of any type with our pictures. Now, they say they get your permission, but they do it through their customer experience improvement program, which sounds nice enough. But again, they're not really being crystal clear about what those things are being used for. Again, there is a tortured person at Adobe who has to watch this video and report to their management. So In the comments below, write what you want them to know. Are you sticking with Adobe? Are you leaving it? Would you be happy if they were to make some adjustments to it? My approach right now is I am days away from publishing a new book on Lightroom Classic that I have been working on for 6 months now. I'm going to finish it. But after that, I am going to start exploring alternatives and see if I can find another app to manage my almost 1 million photo catalog. Don't forget to subscribe for more updates. Bye.